The following video is presented for entertainment purposes only. Always take suitable precautions regarding health and safety if you're using any potentially hazardous materials. Read the instructions, understand them, and ask questions of the community or the supplier if you're unsure or you need help. The only stupid question is one you do not ask. Stay safe and have fun. Hello and welcome to the Museum of the Tin Elephant. My name is Dave and I'm going to take you through a process of the making of Jack Bogget, who's a character I invented for the purposes of this video. It effectively takes you through sculpting, moulding and then casting of a plaster piece, which is an art piece which you can hang on the wall, based around a fairy who I've called Jack Bogget. I'll tell you about him later. I use monster clay. It's a plasticine oil-based clay for my sculpt. It needs warming up, so I'm warming it up. It can also be put in the oven if you want to pour it. Be very careful with hot clay. Now it's an oil-based clay, which means it won't dry out in the air. You can use a water-based clay for this. I've even used blue tack when I've been stuck. Cleaning the board, the baseboard was just a bit of formica that I had spare. I had to warm it up to get the clay to stick. Now, I'm just putting down a thickness here with like pea-sized blobs of clay. The reason you do that is the thickness of your clay is going to determine the thickness of your cast. So the height of the baseboard is going to dictate the height of your cast and your finished cast plaster. So it's important to have a good thickness there. The frame, I decided to make the frame from these sticks, which is a stick I found in the woods, and I brought home. It's dry stick, and I was just using a file there just to take the loose parts off, because when I take the mould, they could come away in the mould. So I'm just removing any loose parts, cutting the stick up there to different lengths, and then I'm going to effectively take half of the stick away on the sander. Now, I did initially consider using the bandsaw, and you will see a piece in a minute where I go back to the bandsaw, but it's actually a lot safer on your fingers to try and just sand away half of this. If you don't have a sander like this, you can certainly cut this in half with a saw very carefully. But you'll see here, the main thing here I'm worried about is my fingers, because I like them. So I'm going to not chop my fingers off. Because of the guide there, the blade guide is very high. There's a lot of blade exposed. So I'm just being very careful with that. And there's a piece there. If anyone's operated any kind of machinery, please always be very, very careful about your fingers. Even though it's a small saw, it will nibble through them quite easily. Especially on a fresh blade, which it has. So I use that piece of wood just to keep everything safe. That's important. And what this does is gives me a really nice half frame size. I don't want the whole full circle on profile. I need half of this because this is going to sit on that board, and the raised part will just the flat part's going to be flat on the board effectively. Now, to make my frame, I'm just cutting 45-degree cuts here with a mitre block. So what I'm doing is just laying out the outside frame. To get it to stick properly there, I'm just putting an extra roll of the plasticine underneath, and then just heating it up, which allows it to stick and effectively glue that stick down, and to embed it in as well, because when it comes to moulding, it's important to consider silicone rubber as water. So you want to be able to seal it against any kind of leaks. And this is what I'm doing to start with. This is just a step just to fill that gap, because the wood is not firmly down there. Just to seal that gap between the wood and the baseboard, I'm just putting small little rolls of clay in there. That's important. It's not essentially important, but mold making experience will tell you that silicone will be very, very good at finding the smallest gap that you have in your sculpt. And you don't want too many undercuts, where the silicone could possibly go underneath itself and trap itself in there effectively. And that's it. So that's the thickness of the clay I want and the frame set up. which is my initial setup, and then we'll take it from there. So we'll get into the sculpting of it. And this is a slightly longer section of the video, but I did speed lots of bits up because sculpting is something you need to practice. It doesn't matter how good you are. Nobody's judging you but yourself. We could get into the whole artist's way of the whole process of trying to be creative, where you've got the negative voices in your head telling you there's much better people. There are hundreds of thousands of people better at sculpting than me. It doesn't matter. I'm just sketching out here a character or a creature that sort of came as a concept of a bit of Labyrinth and a bit of Brian Froud stuff and Dark Crystal. The sort of a character which appeared to me to be like a go-between between the fairy realm and human realm, and just test fitting some eyeballs there, which are small wooden beads. You can use metal marbles or glass beads, whatever you feel, if you want to get that smoothness. I like the idea of the different realms and him coming out of the fairy realm into the human realm as a bit of a ambassador or trader, or he's I'm trying to think about what he does. He doesn't mind humans as much as the other fairies. He gets on with remote cattle outstations and remote mountain cottages where he would call upon the housewives or the family members there and exchange goods for cream or some meat or something to take back. So he's a bit of a trader. So the idea was that to have him coming out of the frame, and this is something I've done before, which I quite like the idea of him to break the fourth wall if you want. So there's a picture frame there with something in it, but he's coming through it. So I was going to sculpt his hands grasping the frame there, and this is something I'm building up slowly. When I'm sculpting it and I look back at it, I realise how much I'm faffing around, right? So when you're blocking out the main details, which is what I've done, don't get into the smaller details too quickly, right? Go over the whole thing, get your block out, get your general shapes. I'm thinking about anatomy, I'm thinking about the bone structure, and I'm trying to place in, he's got a skull under his flesh, so where's his optic sockets, where's his jawline? Hands, awful things to sculpt. Not fun, but I get to them eventually. But so the idea is that I'm trying to block him out in a point where he starts emerging almost, because I didn't think about what he was going to look like before I started him. I had no concept art, which is not something I recommend. I recommend you do some sketches if you want. I had no idea really what he was going to look like until I just thought of this quite fat, jolly fellow who was obviously mischievous and blessed with the fairy arts, but also I was used to trading and speaking with humans in more remote areas of the country. There's a big flash up there of what I'm about to use on him, which is a lighter fluid. So the wax and the in the plasticine and the oils in the plasticine will be softened by this lighter fluid, and you use it to smooth out everything you need to do. It's quite strong, so once you've done this, the clay will stay soft for some time, and it will remove a lot of the tool marks. So I'm knocking it back with this in order to get a better idea of my basic shapes, like the brow line, the bridge of the nose, the cheekbones, the jawline, the lip. But I haven't really yet got a concept of where I'm going with it as far as what he's wearing. I want some trees in the background, so there's a bit of a tree over there on the left, the suggestion of the forest behind him. So a quick word about tools, because you'll see me showing and cycling through a number of tools here, some of which are, as you can see, there's a bought set of wire loop tools, various ends on them, the blue handle tool on the right, and there's a brown handled one as well. You'll see just off picture is there's silicone tips, really useful for smoothing the clay. You will get used to 1 or 2 or 3 tools and probably cycle between them. I had difficulty sculpting the left hand coming out the frame. Hands are really awkward. I'm not practiced enough as a sculptor, so I decided to cheat a little, but also I like the idea of this walking staff that he'd be holding, because he travels a lot, right? He's wandering the deep woods, and he's going to have this walking staff. So I played a bit there with a stick, and I also swapped that out for some plasticine to prevent the undercuts of the stick. But the idea is to have that slightly out frame as well. So that's going to help with the impression that he's walking out of their realm and into ours. At this point, I made a major breakthrough with his character, because I kept seeing this face, and like I said, these things kind of emerge after a while. You kind of stare at them and you say, oh, what's missing? And he's fairly old, I'd say. Fairies tend to live for a long time unless crossed by unfortunate events or iron. So I decided to give him really bushy eyebrows. It's a caricature. It's a 2.5D sculpt, so it's not a 3-dimensional piece. You know, I'm not sculpting right round his head. This is a plaque. It's a 2.5D. So I wanted to give it this character of an expression, and one of the main points I could see on this guy was these really bushy eyebrows that you get as you get older. And so I started just added there a small clay lump, and I started texturing them. You can see them better in this shot, where I'm using the light more just to see the profile of things. So this is a tool that I use to extrude the different shapes. You can buy it from online pottery supplies, etc. It's like a squeezable gun which you stuff full of clay, as I'm doing, and you change the end of that extrusion nozzle there, which I'm just swapping out for spaghetti. There's another one on the desk there you can see with a little slot in it. But when you squeeze this up, it forces the clay through that extrusion tool and generates shapes for you, so you can put in a number of shapes. And you can see here we have Play-Doh Barbershop. If anyone gets that reference, you're as old as I am. So that gives me lots of single strands. Now the reason I want these thin strands like this is I could roll them out by hand, but that's time spent when I could just be doing something else. So I wanted to do like a Celtic or a knotwork, like Celtic knotwork, and very often what I've done in the past is cheated in a way of, rather than sculpt that individually, and it's such a fine detail would have been really difficult, I'm plaiting these strands. I think the first one was a little bit clumsy, but I did it 2 or 3 times, and then use that plaited design work to add detail to the clothing. I've been thinking about the clothing. You can see before as well, there's a point there where I had, he's going to be wearing a leaf for a hat, but no, it just didn't work on the scale. But the hat was one of those things that I really struggled with. It looked like a flat cap for ages, and then I turned it into a bandana, and then it just wasn't working. It looked like Del Boy from Only Fools and Horses, and it just wasn't working for me. So I actually went online and I googled goblin hat, right? So because, like I said, thousands of hive mind out there. So, and I came across these really nice felt hats that this Etsy producer was doing, and got an idea from that. And then I came across these woolen knitted ones, and I thought, yes, it's going to be wool because natural materials. And there you go. So this is a bit of a leap forward, but you see his coat there. This is just before, and then I fade into putting that plaited edge on his coat. And what that does is it gives you a good variation in detail, which I wanted. So he's getting pretty complete here. You've got the smoother areas and the the more detailed areas. They're good contrast. You don't want everything really detailed or everything really basic. So I'm just putting the finishing touches to this guy really. Happy with the contrast between detailed sections compared to smooth sections. It's always good to have that contrast. I think he's got a nice character. He looks like a nice guy. He doesn't look too evil or mischievous. I think that's the character that came across with him anyway. He's emerged to a point where I'm happy with where he's at. You can keep going and going and going, and you can get into the detail as much as you like. The silicone will take a lot of pretty much exactly what you sculpt, so the more detail you put in, the better. In the next video, we're going to be molding him in silicone rubber. I'll talk a bit about silicone. I'll talk a bit about making the molding box. This is a flat plate mold. It's pretty much the simplest you can do, and it's definitely something you'll be able to do on your kitchen table. You just need to know a few simple things, and you can do your own projects. So I hope you enjoyed it to this point. Thanks for sticking with me. My name is Dave. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoy Jack Bogget, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.